The crystalline hall of Zenith Prime Station hummed with a low, steady vibration that made the air itself feel thick with tension. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in their designated sections, each area modified to accommodate the wildly different needs of its occupants. Some breathed methane. Others required intense gravity fields just to keep their bodies from collapsing. A few existed partially in dimensions that hurt to look at directly. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Velrith, his elongated form draped in the ceremonial robes of the Council's High Court. His 6 eyes moved independently, taking in every corner of the massive chamber as he spoke. The translator device embedded in his throat crackled slightly, converting his native language into the standard galactic tongue that echoed through everyone's personal receivers. Protocol Omega has held for 300 cycles, Velrith announced, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. The Sol system remains sealed. The humans remain contained. The quarantine continues to protect us all. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Some species clicked their approval. Others released pheromones of satisfaction. The humans were locked away, and that was how it should stay. But in the back of the observation deck, far from the important delegates and their advisors, a young Etherian analyst named Kira barely heard the ambassador's words. Her slender fingers moved across her data pad, scrolling through files that made her stomach turn. She'd been working in the Council's historical archives for 2 years now, but it wasn't until 3 months ago that she'd gained clearance to access the restricted files. The ones labeled First Contact War. The ones that explained why humanity had been sealed away from the rest of civilization. Kira had always been curious by nature. Her professors at the academy had praised her for it, though some had warned her that curiosity could be dangerous when it came to certain topics. The human question was one of those topics. You didn't ask about them. You didn't dig into the old war records. You simply accepted that the Council had made the right decision and moved on with your life. But Kira couldn't move on. Not after seeing the casualty reports. The Krell Dominion had been the galaxy's dominant military power for over 1,000 years. Their warriors were legendary, bred for combat from birth, trained in tactics that had conquered countless worlds. When they'd first detected the signals from Earth, they'd sent a diplomatic ship. Or so the official records claimed. The classified files told a different story. The Krell hadn't gone to Earth to talk. They'd gone to conquer. They'd seen a primitive world, barely beginning to explore its own star system, and they'd decided to claim it before anyone else could. 50,000 Krell warriors descended on Earth in the largest invasion force the Dominion had ever assembled for a single planet. It should have been over in days. Kira pulled up the combat footage, her hands shaking slightly as she watched. The video quality was poor, corrupted by age and by the electromagnetic interference that human weapons apparently generated. But she could see enough. Krell drop ships landing in a human city, their warriors pouring out with weapons that could melt through steel. Human soldiers meeting them with primitive projectile weapons that should have been useless. But the humans didn't fight like any species the Krell had encountered before. They didn't break when their lines collapsed. They didn't retreat when the situation became hopeless. One clip showed a human soldier, bleeding from multiple wounds, crawling toward a Krell position with some kind of explosive device clutched in his hands. He detonated it when he got close enough, taking himself and 6 Krell warriors with him. Another showed human civilians, people who had no military training, grabbing whatever weapons they could find and throwing themselves at the invaders. The Krell commanders had sent increasingly frantic messages back to their home fleet. These creatures are insane, one transmission read. They fight like cornered animals. They would rather die than surrender. The invasion lasted 6 weeks. Of the 50,000 Krell warriors who landed on Earth, fewer than 300 made it back to their ships. The rest died in cities and fields, in mountains and underground bunkers, anywhere humans could find them. The Krell Dominion, for the first time in its history, retreated in complete defeat. Kira read the after-action reports filed by Krell survivors. They all said the same thing in different ways. Humans didn't treat war as a profession or even as a necessity. They treated it as a matter of survival, and they were willing to sacrifice absolutely anything to win. Every single one of them was a potential soldier. Every building was a potential fortress. Every tool was a potential weapon. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Galactic Council's emergency session had lasted for weeks. Every major power contributed their analysis. The conclusion was unanimous and terrifying. Humanity represented an existential threat not because they were more advanced or more numerous, but because they approached conflict in a fundamentally different way than any known species. If they were allowed to spread among the stars, if they were allowed to learn from other civilizations and adapt their technologies, they could become unstoppable. The solution was Protocol Omega. Total quarantine. Seal the Sol system with automated defense platforms and warning beacons. Let no one in, let no one out. Forever. Kira closed the final file and sat back in her seat. Around her, the council continued its session, discussing trade agreements and border disputes. Normal things. Safe things. But Kira's mind was elsewhere. 300 years had passed since the quarantine began. 300 years of isolation. What had humanity become in all that time? Had they evolved beyond their violent nature? Had they found peace within their sealed system? Or had they spent 3 centuries preparing for the day someone would open that cage? She made her decision in that moment, watching Ambassador Velrith drone on about maintaining the status quo. She had to know the truth. She had to see what the humans had become. Even if it meant breaking the most sacred law in the galaxy. The research vessel Morning Star drifted through the empty void of space, its engines barely humming as it approached the Forbidden Zone. Kira stood on the bridge, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles had turned a pale shade of blue. Around her, 7 other beings worked at their stations, each one trying to mask their fear with concentration on their duties. Captain Torvin sat in the command chair, his weathered face betraying the decades he'd spent exploring the galaxy's safer regions. This was different. This was suicide, and everyone on the bridge knew it. But they'd come too far to turn back now. They'd spent 6 months planning this journey. Pooling their savings, calling in favors, and finally stealing the Morning Star from a research station on the Outer Rim. The ship wasn't designed for combat. It was a science vessel, meant for studying asteroid fields and collecting samples from dead worlds. But it had one advantage. It was fast, and its sensor profile was small enough that they'd hoped to slip past the quarantine boundary undetected. That hope was fading fast. Proximity alert, the navigation officer called out, his voice cracking slightly. Reaching quarantine boundary in 60 seconds. Immediately, their communication systems erupted with noise. Warning beacons, thousands of them positioned around the Sol system, all activated at once. The messages came in every language known to the galactic community, layered over each other in a cacophony of warnings. Turn back. Lethal species quarantined. Approach forbidden by galactic law. The words repeated over and over, growing more insistent as they drew closer. Some of the messages included visual warnings, holographic displays showing what happened to previous ships that had violated the boundary. Most of those ships had simply vanished, their fates unknown. Kira felt her heart pounding in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to turn around, to abandon this insane mission and return to the safety of known space. But she thought of the files she'd read, the questions that haunted her dreams. She had to know. "Captain?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Torvin's face had gone pale, the blue tint of his skin fading to an almost gray color. His hands trembled on the armrests of his chair. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at the view screen showing the invisible line they were about to cross. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Proceed." The navigation officer input the command, and the Morning Star crossed the boundary into Sol space. For 10 minutes nothing happened. The crew barely breathed, watching their sensors for any sign of response. The warning beacons fell silent once they crossed the line, as if the automated systems had given up trying to save them. Space around them appeared empty, just the distant stars and the faint glow of the Sol system's sun far ahead. Kira started to relax slightly. Maybe the humans hadn't detected them. Maybe their small ship had slipped through whatever defenses existed. Maybe they could actually reach Earth and establish peaceful contact. Then every sensor on the bridge started screaming at once. 6 vessels materialized around them, appearing out of nowhere like predators uncloaking before a kill. They were unlike any ships Kira had ever seen. Sleek and dark, with lines that suggested speed and violence in equal measure. They moved with a precision that seemed impossible, adjusting their positions to box in the Morning Star without any visible communication between them. "Where did they come from?" someone shouted. "Our sensors showed nothing." "They were there the whole time," Torvin whispered, his voice filled with horrified realization. "They were invisible to our sensors. They let us cross the boundary. They were waiting." A transmission cut through their communication systems, overpowering their equipment with ease. The voice that came through was human, speaking perfect galactic standard without any translator device. The accent was strange but understandable. "Unknown vessel, you have violated Sol space. Cut your engines immediately and prepare for boarding. Any hostile action will be met with immediate destruction. You have 30 seconds to comply." The voice was calm. Matter of fact. Like this was routine. That somehow made it infinitely more terrifying than if the human had been screaming threats. "Cut engines," Torvin ordered, and the Morning Star went dead in space. Kira watched the chronometer count down. 30 seconds. 20. 10. She wondered what boarding would look like. Would they use docking tubes? Would they cut through the hull? Would they simply destroy the ship if they sensed any resistance? At exactly 0 seconds the answer came. Human soldiers simply appeared on the bridge. No transporter beam, no warning, no sound. One moment the bridge was empty except for the crew, the next moment 6 figures in black armor stood among them, weapons raised. The technology shouldn't exist. Transporters that left no energy signature, that bypassed shields and hull plating like they weren't even there. The Galactic Council had theoretical studies on such systems, but they were centuries away from making them practical. Humans had apparently solved that problem. The lead soldier reached up and removed his helmet with a smooth, practiced motion. Underneath was a young man, maybe in his late 20s by human standards, with cold blue eyes that swept across the bridge with military efficiency. His face showed no emotion, no curiosity, nothing but professional assessment. "I'm Commander Jack Hayes, Human Defense Fleet," he stated. "Who's in charge here?" Kira found herself stepping forward before she could think better of it. Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to stand straight. "I am. My name is Kira. We came in peace. We only wanted to talk, to understand." "That's what the Krell said," Jack interrupted, his voice flat. 300 years ago they came in peace too. Right before they tried to exterminate us." He gestured toward the door with his weapon. "Come with me. All of you. Try anything stupid and my people will put you down before you finish the thought." As human soldiers escorted them off their own bridge, Kira realized with sinking dread that she'd gotten exactly what she wished for. She was about to learn what humanity had become during their long isolation. She just wasn't sure she'd survive the lesson. The human station Guardian 7 hung in orbit around Earth like a colossal fortress made of steel and determination. As Kira was escorted through its corridors, she couldn't help but notice the details that didn't match the savage warriors from the old war records. The hallways were clean, well-lit, and organized with a precision that spoke of discipline rather than chaos. Human crew members passed by, some nodding politely to their colleagues, others absorbed in data pads or quiet conversations. They looked ordinary, normal. That somehow made everything more unsettling. Commander Hayes led her to a room near the station's command center. When the door slid open, Kira braced herself for the worst. Interrogation rooms in most civilizations were deliberately uncomfortable, designed to break down a prisoner's resistance through physical discomfort and psychological pressure. This room was nothing like that. The chair adjusted automatically when she sat down, conforming to her Etherian physiology in a way that shouldn't have been possible without detailed biological scans. A small table nearby held refreshments, and she recognized with shock that they were appropriate for her species' dietary needs. The lighting was set to a spectrum that her eyes found comfortable. Even the temperature felt perfect. It was all wrong. Prisoners weren't supposed to be comfortable. Commander Hayes sat across from her, his posture relaxed but alert. He placed a datapad on the table between them and studied her face for a long moment. His cold blue eyes seemed to see right through her, cataloging every nervous gesture and racing thought. "You violated the most serious law in the galaxy," he finally said, his voice conversational rather than accusatory. "Why?" Kira swallowed hard. She'd prepared speeches for this moment during the long journey to Sol space, practiced explanations that sounded noble and scientific. But sitting here, facing this human who seemed far too calm, all those prepared words evaporated. "Because I wanted to know the truth," she said simply. "The Council says you're monsters. That you're too dangerous to exist among civilized species. But it's been 300 years. 300 years of isolation. Surely you've changed. Surely you've evolved beyond the violence of first contact." Jack studied her for what felt like an eternity. Then without a word he tapped his datapad. The room around them transformed as holographic displays erupted from hidden projectors, filling the space with images that made Kira's breath catch in her throat. "This is Earth," Jack said, gesturing to a rotating image of the blue-green planet below them. "Current population, 42 billion. 300 years ago we had 8 billion. We've quintupled our numbers and maintained a sustainable ecosystem. No small achievement." The image shifted, showing massive structures on the planet's surface, cities that sprawled across entire continents, connected by transportation networks that glowed like veins of light in the darkness. "This is Mars," he continued. The display showed a planet that Kira barely recognized from astronomical surveys. Where there should have been red desert, she saw patches of green, clouds forming in an atmosphere that was supposed to be too thin to support them. Population, 18 billion and growing. We're terraforming it. Give us another century and it'll be as livable as Earth. Kira felt her hands trembling. The council believed humanity was contained on their homeworld, struggling to survive within their quarantine. This was something else entirely. We've colonized every major body in our system, Jack said, and the displays multiplied, showing settlements on moons and asteroids, space stations around gas giants, mining operations in the Kuiper Belt. We've built an entire civilization within this cage you put us in. Then the image changed again and Kira felt her blood turn to ice. Shipyards. Massive construction facilities that dwarfed anything she'd ever seen. And ships. Thousands upon thousands of warships in various states of construction or hanging ready in defensive formations. The designs were sleek and purposeful, incorporating technologies that shouldn't exist outside of theoretical research. After the Krell attacked, Jack continued, his voice taking on a harder edge, something changed in humanity. For the first time in our entire history, every nation on Earth united under a single banner. We stopped fighting each other and focused on a single question. How do we make sure that never happens again? He pulled up combat footage, old and grainy, showing the Krell invasion. Then newer footage showing a second Krell fleet arriving in Sol space years later, probably expecting to finish what they'd started. They sent a second fleet, Jack said quietly. Bigger than the first. More prepared. They'd analyzed their failures and adapted their tactics. He paused and something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. It wasn't pleasant. It never went home. Every single ship was destroyed. Not captured. Not driven off. Destroyed. The hologram showed wreckage, Krell vessels torn apart by weapons that moved too fast to track clearly. Then they sent a third fleet, Jack continued. Even larger. Even more prepared. The display showed another battle, this one even more one-sided than the last. Same result. After that, the Krell stopped coming. But we didn't stop preparing. Kira found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. The council quarantined you because they were afraid. No. Jack leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that made her want to shrink back. They quarantined us because we terrified them. There's a difference. Fear passes. Terror doesn't. He pulled up new displays, tactical simulations showing fleet movements and battle scenarios. Kira recognized some of them with growing horror. They were simulations of attacks on Council worlds, on Krell space, on every major civilization in the galaxy. We didn't just survive the Krell, Jack said. We studied them. We took apart every piece of wreckage, analyzed every tactic they used, understood their psychology and their weaknesses. Then we did the same for every other species in the galaxy. We've spent 3 centuries analyzing your tactics, your technologies, your fleet compositions, your cultural approaches to warfare. His finger moved across the data pad, and simulation after simulation played out. Human forces defeating the VRYNN collective. Crushing the Etherian defense fleet. Overwhelming the Krell Dominion. Each battle ended the same way, total human victory. We could defeat any major power in the galaxy, Jack said flatly. Most of them simultaneously if we had to. Kira felt tears forming in her eyes. Why are you telling me this? Why not just kill us and keep your secrets? Jack stood up and for the first time his expression softened slightly. Because you broke the quarantine to find the truth. You risked everything to understand what we'd become. So now you know. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. Humans don't want war. We never did. But we've become very, very good at it. And that's exactly why the Council will never let us out. They can't risk what we might become if we're free to spread among the stars. The alarms hit like a physical blow. One moment, Kira was sitting in the interrogation room trying to process everything Commander Hayes had shown her. And the next, red warning lights were flooding the corridors and a piercing wail echoed through every corridor of Guardian 7. Her hands shot to her ears as the sound drilled into her skull. Jack was on his feet instantly, his relaxed posture replaced by coiled tension. His hand went to a communication device on his wrist before the announcement even began. Commander Hayes to the bridge immediately, a voice barked over the intercom, cutting through the alarm. Krell battle fleet detected at system's edge. Repeat, Krell battle fleet detected. This is not a drill. For a split second, everything seemed to freeze. Then Jack was moving and Kira found herself scrambling after him without thinking. He didn't order her to stay behind, didn't seem to care that she was following. His mind was already somewhere else, already shifting into whatever mental space human warriors occupied when death came calling. The corridors of Guardian 7 transformed around them. Personnel who'd been walking calmly moments before now moved with urgent purpose. But there was no panic. No shouting. No chaos. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they needed to be and what they needed to do. It was like watching a machine come to life, every part moving in perfect synchronization. They reached the command center within minutes. The doors slid open to reveal a massive circular room dominated by a central holographic display. Dozens of humans sat at their stations, hands flying across controls, voices calling out information in calm, measured tones. The contrast between the mortal danger bearing down on them and their professional demeanor made Kira's skin crawl. The main view screen dominated one wall, and what Kira saw there made her legs nearly give out beneath her. Ships. Hundreds of them. No more than that. Over 500 Krell warships hung at the edge of the Sol system, arranged in their traditional hammer formation. The formation that had conquered 100 worlds. The formation that had never, ever failed them. Until Earth. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," called out a young woman sitting at the communications station. Her voice was steady despite the death sentence displayed on the screen above her. "It's coming from their flagship." "Put it through," Jack ordered, taking his position at the central command console. Kira noticed his hands weren't shaking. Everyone's hands should be shaking right now. The view screen shifted, and a massive reptilian face filled the display. Kira recognized the species immediately from her research. Krell warrior caste, but this one was different from the soldiers in the old combat footage. His scales bore intricate scarring patterns that she knew represented ceremonial marks of honor. His eyes, multiple sets of them, burned with an intensity that transcended simple aggression. This was personal. "Humans," the Krell's voice rumbled through the speakers, translated automatically by their systems. Each word dripped with barely contained rage. 3 centuries ago, my ancestor fled in shame from your primitive world. He was War Master Drexen the Elder, and until his death, he carried the dishonor of that retreat. I am War Master Drexen the Younger, and I have spent my entire life preparing for this moment. The Krell leaned closer to his own camera, his teeth, rows upon rows of them, visible as he spoke. The Krell have spent 300 cycles building this fleet. Training these warriors. Studying your tactics from the fragments of data my ancestor managed to preserve. Today we restore our honor. Today, we erase the stain of defeat that has haunted my family for generations." He paused, and something that might have been satisfaction flickered across his alien features. "You are outnumbered 5 to 1. Your quarantine means no help will come. You will die alone in this sealed cage you call home. Surrender now and die quickly. Resist, and I will make your suffering last for days before I turn your planet to ash." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only the image of the Krell fleet hanging in the void. For 3 seconds nobody in the command center spoke. Kira felt her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. 500 warships. The Krell had brought enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. Against what? A few dozen human vessels? Maybe 100 if they recalled every patrol ship in the system? Then Jack spoke, and his voice was utterly, terrifyingly calm. "Execute battle stations. Deploy all defensive platforms. Recall all patrol ships to defensive positions around Earth and Mars." His fingers moved across his console, pulling up tactical displays. "Send the evacuation signal to all civilian stations. I want everyone in the inner system within the next 2 hours." "Sir," another officer called out, a man with gray streaking through his dark hair. His voice was steady, but Kira could hear the underlying tension. "Current fleet disposition puts us at roughly 120 combat-capable vessels. They outnumber us 5 to 1. For the first time since the alarms began, Kira saw Jack smile. It was the most frightening expression she'd ever witnessed. There was no fear in it. No uncertainty. Just cold, absolute confidence that made her blood freeze. "They think this is about numbers," Jack said quietly, his eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the approaching Krell fleet. "They think 300 years in quarantine made us weak. They think we've been cowering behind our wall, hoping they'd forget about us." He looked up at his crew, and every human in that room met his gaze with the same terrifying calm. "They're about to learn why the galaxy fears us," Jack said. His hand moved to a red panel on his console, fingers hovering over it. "All units, this is Commander Hayes. The Krell have violated the quarantine. They've brought war to our doorstep. They want to finish what they started 3 centuries ago." He pressed the button. Alarms shifted to a different tone, one that Kira somehow knew was even more serious. Execute Protocol Nightfall. Show them what humans have become. Around Kira, the command center erupted into controlled chaos. Orders flowed. Ships began moving into position. And through it all, not a single human showed fear. They'd been preparing for this moment for 300 years. And now, the Krell were going to learn what happens when you give humanity time to prepare. The hidden warriors of humanity. The battle started at 2 in the afternoon, using the time that everyone across the galaxy used to keep things synchronized. The Krell sent their ships forward in the same way they always did, pushing straight ahead with more power than anyone could fight. They were heading right for Guardian 7 and then Earth. This was how they had won 100 times before. They would crush the Defenders' main forces and take over everything. Simple. Direct. Effective. But the humans fought completely differently. From her control room, Kira watched something strange happen on the screens. Instead of the human ships forming a wall to fight back, they split apart into small groups. These groups moved fast, hitting the Krell from different directions all at once. They weren't trying to have a fair fight. They were picking specific parts of the Krell ships to attack, places the enemy didn't protect well. The weak spots between armor pieces. The tubes that carried power through the ships. The equipment that let the Krell see and understand what was happening around them. How do you know exactly where to hit them? Kira turned to a young worker named Lisa who was watching the same screens. Lisa didn't look surprised by the question. We saved all the broken pieces from the last war. For 300 years, we have looked at every single part of Krell ships. Every piece of metal. Every wire. Every way their technology could fail. We learned how to hurt them by studying what was already broken. On the screen in front of them, one human ship got hit hard. The damage was serious. But instead of running away to safety, the ship's captain did something shocking. They pushed the ship forward faster and crashed it directly into a much bigger Krell warship. The human captain made the ship's power system explode on purpose. The explosion was massive. It destroyed 3 Krell ships completely. Those people on that ship, Kira didn't know what to say. She couldn't finish her sentence. An older man named Jack, who seemed to lead the humans, said something cold and clear. They chose to die to help us win. It was the right choice. They removed 3 large enemy ships and gave us more time. That was worth the cost. The Krell fleet kept moving forward, getting closer to Earth. Their leader felt sure they would win because they had so many more ships. Then the humans did something nobody expected. Without any warning, the asteroid belt around the star came alive with explosions. Hundreds of nuclear weapons that had been hidden for a very long time all went off at exactly the same second. The rocks and ice shot out everywhere, smashing through the Krell ships and mixing up their formation. At that perfect moment, human ships that had been hiding came out of the confusion and began attacking the shocked Krell fleet. Jack explained what was happening to Kira as they watched. We have had 100 years to turn this space into a weapon. These rocks, this ice, every path through this area, we changed it all. We prepared it for this one moment. The main Krell warship tried to organize the surviving vessels and push toward Earth. But human ships surrounded it like wolves around prey. Some crashed into the shields to make them weaker. Others found the open parts and attacked the important systems inside. The enemy leader sent out one last message before the end. He only sent one word: demons. The biggest Krell ship broke apart in a bright flash. It destroyed 20 smaller ships around it. The Krell vessels that were still working tried to escape. They attempted to fly away from this star system and return to space where they could jump to other locations. Not a single one made it out. When the battle finished, Jack stood on the bridge of a human ship called the Morning Star where Kira and her crew were. He told them they could leave freely. He wanted them to take what they had seen back to the people who made the rules for the galaxy. What message should we give them? Kira asked. Jack's face was serious and hard like stone. Tell them what really happened here. Tell them we never broke the agreement. We stayed in the space they told us to stay in. But they let the Krell attack us anyway. They caused this war, not us. He paused before saying the next part. Tell them that humanity is coming out now. And we will use the law to protect our rights from this point forward. The Morning Star began its journey back through space toward the rest of the galaxy. Kira looked out the window and saw more and more human ships starting to move. Dozens became hundreds. They were all moving toward the invisible wall that used to keep humanity trapped away from everyone else. The whole galaxy had locked humanity away, thinking they were dangerous. But they had given humans 300 years in that locked space. 300 years to learn everything about war. 300 years to become stronger than anyone else. Now the doors were open. The rest of the galaxy was about to find out something they should have learned long ago. Never trap something that will use that time to become stronger, smarter, and more dangerous than you.